He had everything: money, power, a company built from nothing. Until the woman he loved vanished with his most trusted employee and a piece of his soul. Drunk, disgraced, and discarded near a trash heap, Millionaire CEO James Cole was ready to disappear. But fate had other plans, delivered in the form of Stella, a fierce young woman surviving off scraps and strength. She didn't know his name. She only saw a man worth saving. What began as one act of kindness became a story of rebuilding, redemption, and a love neither of them expected. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The city never really slept. It only dimmed its lights in the poorer districts, where neon signs flickered like dying fireflies, and the only lullaby was the rattling of garbage bins and the soft shuffle of forgotten feet. Stella knew every crack in the pavement of District 11. She could walk blindfolded through its alleys and still find the rusted fence near the bakery where they tossed out stale bread, or the cafe that dumped in used grounds she dried and sold by the ounce. She could smell danger before it arrived. She could spot a rat before it ran. Tonight, the rain came slow, like the sky was too tired to cry properly. Water seeped into her shoes as she maneuvered her cart through puddles and cigarette butts, her gloved hands clenching cold metal handles wrapped in old fabric. She wore 3 layers, none waterproof, and a scarf so frayed it looked like it might unravel with a sigh. But she was alive. And on nights like this, that was the only measurement that counted. Stella paused beside a dumpster near the hotel district. One of the rich ones, where cars had drivers and doors opened with soft clicks instead of keys. The trash here was better. Sometimes she found unopened energy bars or high-end perfume samples. She once found a leather wallet with $300 inside. She returned it. The hotel never thanked her. But she remembered the man's stunned face when she handed it back. She hoisted herself up on a crate to look inside the bin. Empty food containers. Plastic. A broken umbrella. A velvet tie soaked in liquor. Nothing useful. Then she heard it. Not a rat. Not the usual creak of metal. A voice soft, ragged. Groaning. She turned sharply, hand tightening around the crowbar she kept in her coat. There, slumped beside the dumpster, was a man. A tall man, soaked to the bone. His blazer, what was left of it, clung to him like a second skin. His dress shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, had once been snow white. Now it was stained and wrinkled. His shoes were missing. One sock had holes in it. His head hung, chin to chest, arms limp at his sides. But he was breathing shallow, wet gasps, reeking of expensive alcohol. Stella approached slowly. She crouched beside him, her face lit only by the dim street lamp flickering overhead. She could see his features now. Clean-shaven, or he had been. Jawline sharp. Hair cut recently but wild now, dark and soaked. His face wasn't dirty, but it wore something worse, despair. She gently tapped his shoulder. "Hey!" No response. She tapped again, firmer. "Sir, you're gonna catch pneumonia out here." His head rolled slightly. His eyes fluttered. "Bloodshot. Lost. Leave me," he rasped. "Go away." His voice was smooth beneath the damage, like it belonged in boardrooms and headlines, not in the gutter. Stella exhaled through her nose. She looked him over once more. Gold cufflinks, one missing. A watch no longer on his wrist, but the outline of the tan line remained. This man wasn't homeless. Not yet, anyway. She stood, brushed her hands on her jeans, and looked around. No security. No police. No one would help. And she knew what would happen if she left him here. Either he'd disappear by morning, or someone would rob him blind and dump his body in the canal. Stella didn't believe in fate, but she believed in choices. "All right then," she muttered. "Up you go." It took everything in her not to groan under his weight. He was taller than he looked, heavier too, and though he mumbled protests, he didn't fight her. He leaned on her like a man who no longer knew how to stand for himself. She pulled his arm around her shoulder, wrapped one arm around his waist, and began the slow, painful shuffle back to her shelter. It wasn't far, but it felt like miles. A cat hissed from under a stairwell. A window slammed shut. A car passed without slowing. The world didn't stop for people like Stella, or for men who'd fallen from palaces into the dirt. When they finally reached her building, an old warehouse that had long lost its purpose, she kicked open the side door and led him inside. Her space was on the second floor. Small, cracked walls, a mattress on wooden pallets, a hot plate, a kettle, two mismatched chairs. A miracle, really. She laid him on the mattress and pulled a scratchy blanket over him. Then she filled a basin with warm water, dipped a cloth in, and began to clean the rain and grime from his face. He stirred once, eyes fluttering open. He stared at her for a long moment, then whispered, broken, "Why?" Stella paused. "Because I know what it's like to be left in the rain." He closed his eyes again, and Stella, alone in the soft hum of the dark, went to boil water. When he woke, the world was far too still. No horns, no elevator bells, no voice assistants rattling off reminders, no boardroom echoes. Just quiet, the kind that creeps under your skin when you've lived too long surrounded by noise. James Cole opened his eyes slowly, as if the air itself might punish him for daring to come back. The ceiling above him was unfamiliar. Wooden slats, chipped paint, spider cracks in the corners. The scent of something herbal, earthy, lingered in the room. It wasn't a hotel. It wasn't a hospital. And it definitely wasn't his penthouse. His body ached. Not the kind of ache that comes after a hard workout or long flight. This was soul deep. This was consequence. The blanket covering him was scratchy but warm. His clothes were gone, replaced with a clean t-shirt and sweatpants that smelled faintly of detergent and metal. He struggled to sit up, blinking against the hazy light filtering in from a grimy window. That's when he saw her. The woman. She sat in a worn-out armchair across the room, one leg pulled beneath her, stirring a chipped mug with a metal spoon. Her eyes, wide, dark, unreadable, met his. "You're awake," she said. Her voice was soft but firm. Not gentle, practical. James's throat burned as he tried to speak. "Where am I?" She set the mug on the windowsill. "Safe." He scanned the room, confused. "What the hell happened?" "I found you lying half-conscious beside a dumpster in the rain," she said, standing. "You were drunk. Could barely speak." He rubbed his temples, trying to remember. Images floated through the fog. Elena's face turning away, the door slamming, the silence of his luxury apartment after she left. The bottom of a bottle. Then nothing. "And you brought me here?" he asked, voice rough. She nodded once. "Why?" She walked over to him, handed him a second mug of warm tea. He didn't take it at first. She placed it gently on the crate beside the mattress. "You looked like you'd been thrown away," she said. "And I don't leave people in the trash." He almost laughed. Almost. But his pride wasn't in the mood for humor. "You don't even know who I am." "No," she said. "And I don't need to." Silence stretched between them like a fraying rope. He looked her over more closely now. Her clothes were worn, functional, layered against the cold. She had smudges on her hands, scratches on her arms, a face too young for the weight it carried. "You live here?" he asked. She raised an eyebrow. "Clearly." He looked down at himself again. Humiliation crept in like smoke under a door. "I didn't ask for help." "No one does," she replied. James sat back, exhaling. The tea steamed beside him, untouched. His fingers twitched. He stared at the mug like it was a test he hadn't studied for. "You have a name?" he asked. "Stella." He nodded slowly. "James." Her expression didn't change. No spark of recognition. No awe. No, the James Cole. Just a blink. And then she turned away to tend to something near the hot plate. He watched her pour hot water into a tin pot, drop in bits of dried vegetables and what looked like rice. "How long have I been here?" he asked. 2 days, she said. "You were burning up. I thought you'd slip into a coma, but your body held out." He closed his eyes, ashamed. "Sorry I imposed," he muttered. She stirred the pot. "You didn't." Life did. That struck him harder than anything else. He opened his mouth, then shut it. What could he say? That he used to command empires with a signature? That women used to chase him, rooms used to hush when he entered, journalists used to beg for his words? He was sitting on a mattress in a broken room, rescued by a woman who probably hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. Nothing he had been before mattered here. Stella brought over 2 bowls, handed one to him. It smelled good. Not gourmet, not refined. Just honest food. He hesitated again. She noticed. I don't poison people, she said flat. He took the bowl, held it, stared into it for a moment before taking a bite. It was hot, salty, filling. It tasted like effort. When he finished, she was already rinsing her bowl with rainwater collected in a jug. He set his beside hers. I had a company, he said quietly. She paused. I was CEO of an investment platform, he continued. Top 5 in the country. Forbes cover. TV interviews. Suits custom-made from Italy. Stella turned to face him. I had someone too. Elena. Said she loved me. We were going to start a foundation together. Help underprivileged women break into tech. He scoffed at his own words. She ran off with my CTO. Took half my personal data, including key files. And my watch collection. Stella's expression remained unchanged, but something in her eyes softened. Why? She asked. Because I gave her too much, he said. Of my trust. My heart. Everything. I thought she loved me. Stella didn't rush to comfort him. She let the words sit there, heavy in the air. I know what it feels like, she said finally. To give someone the last good thing you have, and watch them run with it. Their eyes met in that moment. 2 strangers, bonded not by background or class, but by ache. James leaned back. So what happens now? Stella walked over and opened the window, letting in the faint sounds of the night city. Cars, sirens, voices. You get up, she said simply. And if you don't want to go back to who you were, you figure out who you're going to become. James looked at her, as if she were saying something no one had ever dared to tell him. He didn't reply, but he drank the tea. And for the first time in months, he didn't feel like falling asleep just to disappear. The days that followed moved slowly, like drying paint on a wall no one cared to look at. James stayed. He didn't ask to, and Stella didn't invite him. She just kept putting a second bowl on the table. Just kept boiling enough water for 2. He didn't talk much that first week. He mostly stared at the walls, the window, the floor. At the jagged path that had led him from penthouses to peeling wallpaper and creaking floorboards. The sounds of the city drifted through the thin windows. Arguments, laughter, the clanging of garbage bins. Life indifferent. Stella never hovered. She left in the mornings to do her rounds, collecting plastic, broken appliances, cans, and bottles in her squeaky cart. She came back before dusk with dust in her hair and oil on her hands. Some days, she sold enough scrap to buy fresh bread or canned stew. Other days, they shared a boiled potato in silence. James watched her work, slowly learning her rhythm. She didn't move like someone broken. She moved like someone used to pain, someone who didn't need sympathy or applause. And he hated that it took losing everything for him to recognize that kind of strength. On the 6th day, he asked, Do you need help? She shrugged. Do you know how to carry something heavier than your own grief? He chuckled, low and bitter. I'm learning. She handed him a pair of torn gloves and nodded toward the cart. Then start by pushing. That day, he followed her through the city's underbelly. Past restaurants that tossed full meals with expired labels. Past broken fences and hollow-eyed men who nodded at Stella in recognition. She knew them all by name. She helped where she could. A sandwich here. A blanket there. James didn't speak. He just watched. When they returned, his shirt was stained, his palms raw. But something inside him was different. Not healed. Not whole. But awake. That night, as Stella fixed the kettle to boil, James sat across from her and did something he hadn't done since Elena left. He told the truth. I didn't just lose a company, he said, staring into the flame. I built it from scratch. First-gen founder. 22 employees when we launched. We rose fast, took over smaller firms, restructured everything. I worked 14-hour days, slept under my desk. You know how people say, don't make work your whole life? She raised an eyebrow, waiting. I did it anyway, he said. And it worked. Until it didn't. Stella handed him a tin mug of hot water. No judgment. No comfort. Just presence. Elena wasn't just my girlfriend, James continued. She was part of my company. Part of my circle. We planned a whole division for female entrepreneurs together. She said she believed in the vision. Said she believed in me. He didn't realize he was gripping the mug so tightly until Stella reached out and loosened his fingers. She left a note, he said. That's all. No confrontation. No warning. Just a paragraph. Telling me she found something better. Someone more alive. Stella didn't flinch. You ever been replaced in your own story? He asked quietly. Yes, she said. They sat in silence, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. I thought about ending it, James admitted. After she left. After the media had their way with me. The board forced me out. The investors pulled. Everyone who said they'd stand by me vanished. He looked at Stella and his voice softened. And then you. Out of everyone. You found me in the trash and didn't walk away. Stella leaned back in her chair. Not everything that ends is garbage. Some things just fall apart before they find their purpose again. He blinked at her. She stood up, walked over to the corner of the room where a stack of old newspapers sat. She pulled out one, wrinkled, yellowing. Held it out. James took it. On the front was his face. From almost 2 years ago. Headlines blared. James Cole disgraced after company collapse. Personal life in shambles. He looked up at her. You kept this. I keep things people throw away, she said. Sometimes they still have value. He set the paper down carefully, like it might bite. You said I have to figure out who I'm going to become, he said. She nodded. I want to find out if that version of me is still possible. The one who built something from nothing. But better. Without ego. Without compromise. Stella crossed her arms. You're not going to do that sitting around here brooding like a movie character. He smirked. I was hoping you'd say something inspiring. I'm not here to inspire you, she replied. I'm here to help you get your hands dirty again. And just like that, the first brick in a new foundation was laid. Not on a plot of land, not with blueprints, but between two people who had lost everything and still had the courage to begin again. The first plan was written on the back of a flattened cereal box. James had searched for hours through a pile of torn papers and scavenged books to find a single blank page before Stella handed him the cardboard, a pencil sharpened down to a stub. He gave her a look, half amused, half exasperated. She shrugged. If you can't build it here, she said, you'll never build it anywhere. So he began. By candlelight, in a room that still smelled faintly of mold and boiled rice, James Cole, former CEO, once dubbed the future of fintech, sketched the bones of a new company. But this time, it wasn't about investors, IPOs, or sleek PR campaigns. This time, he was building something human. He called it EtherBridge, an online platform that would help small creators and gig workers access microloans, mentorship, and shared resources without the red tape. It was scrappy, raw, idealistic, just like him now. Stella didn't pretend to understand the tech, but she understood systems, survival, structure. She saw where things could be cleaner, tighter, clearer. And she had no problem pointing out the holes. This page makes no sense, she'd say. Who's your audience here, robots? Or, this plan's got 6 steps, but the people you're trying to help only have time for 3. He hated how often she was right. Together, they worked by candlelight and sunlight. James repurposed a broken laptop he had once tossed in a fit of rage. Stella rewired the makeshift generator, bartering scrap metal for extra battery cells. They built a desk out of shipping pallets and propped it with bricks. She even fixed a cracked phone screen using glue, fishing line, and a piece of clear plastic she claimed came from a toy factory dumpster. He watched her work with awe. She had no formal education, no LinkedIn profile, no degrees. But she solved problems with a mechanic's focus and a surgeon's precision. She didn't call herself smart. But James did. You know, he said one night as she tested the power flow to the laptop, if you ever applied to a job with your skills, wiring, engineering, logistics, you'd probably outrank half the men I used to employ. I'm not looking for a title, she replied without looking up. I'm looking for impact. The words stunned him. He realized then, Stella didn't just help him rebuild. She redefined what rebuilding meant. By the end of the first month, they had a working prototype. By the end of the third, a network. They found a local community center willing to let them host weekly tech classes. James taught the basics of finance. Stella translated his lectures into plain speech. While he spoke of compound interest and digital identity, she reminded him to stop using phrases like seed round and growth targets. They're not launching a company, she'd whisper. They're launching hope. Their first funding came from a local women's co-op. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get traction. Enough to take the project from idea to reality. James began holding meetings in a borrowed office above a laundromat. The chairs squeaked. The printer jammed. But for the first time in 2 years, he felt like a man again. Not because of suits or money, but because people believed in what he was doing. And standing beside him, always slightly behind the curtain, always watching, was Stella. He tried to bring her forward. To thank her. To introduce her to the business world. But she always shrugged it off. This isn't my place, she said once, when he invited her to speak at a local investor roundtable. James shook his head. No, you just haven't seen how bright your place is yet. Still, she stayed in the background. Not out of fear, but because she didn't need the stage to feel power. She'd seen how quickly the spotlight could turn cold. They worked. They failed. They laughed. They argued. She once dumped a whole cup of instant coffee on one of his whiteboards when he called her just street smart. He apologized that same hour. But brick by brick, the company rose. So did something else. It crept in slowly, like the warmth of sunlight on skin after a long winter. The realization that what they were building wasn't just a business. It was a life. A shared one. They never said it. Not out loud. But some nights, after long hours and quiet dinners, their hands would brush and neither would pull away. He'd glance up from his sketchpad and find her already watching him. They'd hold eye contact for a heartbeat too long, then return to work, as if nothing had passed between them, though everything had. By the end of the second year, Etherbridge was generating headlines. Startup with a soul, one article called it. Built from rock bottom. And in every photo James took, there was one seat left empty beside him. The world didn't know her name. But he did. And she was the reason he remembered his own. There's a point in healing, somewhere between broken and whole, where fire meets steel, where pain becomes fuel, where survival becomes strategy. James had reached that point. So had Stella. They just didn't know it yet. The office above the laundromat was gone now, replaced by a sleek but modest space in a downtown building they co-leased from a progressive developer who admired their cause. The furniture was secondhand, the floors polished concrete, the walls left intentionally raw, like scars that no longer needed hiding. There were laptops on desks, interns buzzing through Slack channels, code scrawled on whiteboards. But in the center of it all, tethering chaos to purpose, were James and Stella. The two of them had become a rhythm. He handled the meetings, the pitches, the technical blueprints. She handled the people, the pulse, the unspoken needs, whether that meant unclogging the bathroom sink or pulling aside a shaken intern after a bad phone call. They spoke little during work hours. They didn't need to. Their bond wasn't loud. It was forged in moments. The way he'd leave her favorite chocolate bar by the keyboard without a word. The way she'd adjust his collar before a pitch, as casually as if brushing lint from her own shirt. The glances they'd share across the boardroom table when someone said something utterly ridiculous. There was something deeper there, something simmering. But they'd both learned not to rush things they wanted to last. One night, James stayed late working through a major client migration. A large creative firm was transitioning onto the Etherbridge platform. Stella sat nearby, disassembling a small printer that had been jamming for 3 days. Wires, gears, tiny plastic parts littered her desk like puzzle pieces no one else cared about. Outside, rain beat steadily against the tall windows. The city glowed below, blurred in wet neon. Stella glanced up. "You ever sleep?" James smirked. "Only when I dream about term sheets." She chuckled, setting down her screwdriver. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." He leaned back in his chair. His face was thinner now, sharper, but no longer haunted. His eyes still carried storm, but not the kind that tore things down. The kind that grew things. "I used to think success was how many people knew my name," he said. Stella didn't respond. She knew better than to interrupt when he dropped his mask. "But now, I think it's how many people I don't have to prove anything to." She tilted her head. "And how many's that?" He looked at her. Really looked. "Just one." Her throat tightened, but she didn't show it. "Careful," she said softly, her voice steady. "You're getting dangerously close to sounding human." He smiled, gentle this time. "Then, do you ever think about it?" She stiffened. "About what?" "This. Us. Everything we've built. And the fact that I still don't know what you dream about at night." She hesitated, setting the screwdriver down more slowly than necessary. "I dream about space," she said. "Not the stars. Just space. A room that's mine. Clean walls. Quiet. A soft bed. A window that opens. A kitchen I don't have to share with 5 strangers. No alarms. Just breath. Just safety." She looked at him. "And sometimes," she added quietly, "I dream there's a voice in that space. One that says my name like it's not a burden. Like it means something." James stood slowly, crossing the room. He didn't reach for her hand. He reached for her face, his thumb brushing a streak of oil from her cheek. The touch lingered just long enough to make her breath catch. "I know your name," he said. "I know what it means." For a heartbeat, time froze. Then the printer behind her sparked loudly and spit out a crumpled sheet of paper. They both jumped and laughed. Hard. It was the first real laugh they'd shared in weeks, and it shattered the tension like glass. Not in a way that broke anything. In a way that made room for something more honest. Later that week, they stood side by side on the stage of their first major summit. Hundreds of entrepreneurs, journalists, and activists had come to hear them speak. Etherbridge was no longer a rising company. It was a movement. When the applause ended and the lights dimmed, James turned to her. "You ready to stop hiding behind me?" he asked, only half teasing. Stella smiled, straightening her jacket. "I was never behind you," she said. "I was beside you the whole time. You just weren't looking." He blinked, then nodded. That night, he wrote her name on the next pitch deck. First, before his own. Stella Solis, co-founder. Not because it was fair, because it was true, and because real fire doesn't just burn. It forges. The past doesn't knock. It slithers in through doors you forgot to lock, slips into inboxes you haven't checked in months, shows up in places you thought you had made too small for it to fit. For James, it walked in wearing red heels and a $5,000 handbag. The receptionist buzzed twice, an emergency code. He had just wrapped a meeting with their newest strategic partner, his mind halfway into a follow-up call, when he turned the corner into the Etherbridge lobby and saw her. Elena. Exactly as he remembered, and somehow worse. Her beauty was untouched, tailored hair, designer coat, manicured fingers curled around a crocodile leather clutch. But her eyes had changed. That sharp blue once filled with ambition now looked desperate. Hollow, as if whatever fire she'd traded him for had long since burned her out. She smiled. "Hi, James." He didn't move. "It's been a long time," she said. "Not long enough." The receptionist pretended to be busy. Everyone else had stopped breathing. Elena stepped forward. "I saw the articles, the interviews, the comeback. You look good." "I am good," James replied flatly. Her smile faltered. She shifted tactics, tilting her head just slightly, lowering her voice. I made mistakes. I know that. I didn't come to fight. I came because I know I messed up. You didn't just mess up, he said. You gutted me, and then tried to profit from the blood. Her eyes flickered. I was scared, she said. Back then, you were working yourself to death. You were married to that company, more than to me. James's jaw tightened. So you stole from me? She flinched, then softened. A performance. One he'd fallen for before. I thought maybe we could talk, she said, stepping closer. Privately. A door opened behind them. Stella. She wore her usual black boots, a blazer over her jumpsuit, and that quiet intensity that made people move out of her way even if they didn't know why. Her eyes locked onto Elena in an instant, measured, unshaken. Elena turned toward her, smiling politely. Hi. I know who you are, Stella said. The room turned to ice. James spoke before Elena could. She was just leaving. James, wait, Elena said, voice rising, panic slipping through the cracks. I know I hurt you, but I also know you. I know you don't let go of things easily. You need me, whether you admit it or not. He stared at her. For a long time. Then, with a voice as calm as a sealed vault, he said, I did need you. Then I needed to lose you. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. He nodded to the head of security, who had been watching from a distance. Call Detective Sloan. Tell him the woman who disappeared with my personal property and my CTO just walked back through my front door. Elena blinked. What are you talking about? You left behind more than a broken heart, he said. You left behind evidence. Confidential data. 2 antique watches worth over $200,000. Don't worry. Charges were filed a long time ago. They've just been waiting for a face to attach them to. The air turned electric. No, James, she whispered. You wouldn't. I would, he said. And I did. Stella stepped beside him, silent. Her presence wasn't loud. It was unmovable. Elena's eyes darted between them, rage building now where charm had just been. So this is her, she spat. This is who you rebuilt with? A what street girl? A charity case you pulled from a gutter? Stella didn't blink. But James stepped forward, voice low and sharp. She's the reason I'm still standing. She helped build everything you thought I couldn't without you. He turned to Stella. For just a second, the storm in his voice cleared. She taught me that love doesn't steal. It stays. Sirens were faint in the distance. Elena backed away, a shaky laugh rising in her throat. You're nothing without me, James. You can play the saint now, but I made you. He stepped forward, expression stone. You made me bleed. She made me heal. The security guard gently took Elena's arm as 2 plainclothes detectives walked in through the glass doors. No cuffs yet. Just a quiet exit through a crowd that watched every step. When the doors closed behind her, silence fell like a curtain. They walked out onto the rooftop 20 minutes later. James leaned against the railing. The sky was beginning to bruise with twilight. The city below moved on, indifferent. I should feel triumphant, he muttered. I don't. Stella leaned next to him, arms crossed. That's because what you feel is freedom. And that doesn't come with fireworks. He looked at her, something fragile breaking open behind his eyes. Why did you stay? He asked. After all this time? When I had nothing. She shrugged. Because you were worth something even then. You just didn't know it yet. He turned to face her fully. The words caught in his throat, raw. I'm still afraid, he whispered. Of messing this up. Of not being enough for you. Stella smiled. Not with pity. With recognition. Then you're ready. He didn't ask what she meant. Because he knew. It wasn't about revenge. It was about release. And for the first time, James Cole felt what he had never known, even at the height of his empire. Peace. There was a quiet that followed closure. Not silence, exactly, more like a deep, resonant calm. The kind that arrives when the storm is past and the ground, though still wet and cracked, begins to hold weight again. After Elena was gone, neither of them spoke about it. Not immediately. James buried himself in work, as he always had. Contracts to revise. Press inquiries to dodge. New projects to launch. Stella returned to the systems, the numbers, the people, quietly keeping the company's pulse steady while he exhaled the last breath of his old life. But something had shifted. It was in the way she no longer turned away when his eyes lingered too long. In the way he started watching the clock when she was out of the room too long, as if time lost its shape without her near. Still, nothing was said. Words felt too heavy, too final, so they spoke in gestures. She brought him breakfast 3 mornings in a row, always without a word, just a steaming mug and a plate balanced on one hand. He left her handwritten notes with quick sketches of her tinkering at the printer or sleeping on the office couch with a book still open on her chest. One evening, after a long day of meetings, James found her standing alone in the conference room, lights dimmed, staring out over the skyline. The city stretched before them, glass and steel softened by golden dusk. He didn't say her name, just stepped in quietly, his presence brushing against hers like wind on skin. Stella didn't turn. "Do you remember the first night I found you?" she asked. "I remember the rain," he said. "I remember you didn't ask who I was." "I didn't need to," she replied. "You look like someone who forgot how to ask for help." He stepped beside her. "And you helped anyway." She looked at him now, her face illuminated by the orange-purple light bleeding through the windows. Her eyes held so much: history, fire, restraint. "You made me remember who I was," he said. "But more than that, you made me believe I could be someone better." He reached for her hand. She didn't move away. His fingers brushed hers, then slowly threaded through. "It's been 2 years," he continued. "We've built something real. And I've been afraid, Stella. Afraid of what it would mean to want more." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Because you thought wanting more would ruin what we already had." He nodded. She looked down at their joined hands, then back up at him. "I've been afraid too," she said. "Not of losing you, but of finally being seen, and not being enough." James's expression cracked. Not in weakness, but in love. Pure, naked, unguarded love. "You're the first thing that's ever felt enough to me," he said. "The only thing." A long, suspended silence. Then, without fanfare, without hesitation, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't urgent or desperate. It didn't ask for anything. It simply was a culmination of everything unsaid, every shared silence, every scraped knee, and every late-night triumph. His hand cradled her jaw. Her fingers curled into his shirt. And the kiss deepened, not from hunger, but from recognition. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "So what now?" she asked. He smiled, soft, tired, sure. "Now we stop pretending we're just building a company." She laughed, the sound like wind through wind chimes. That night, they left the office without taking separate trains. They walked home together, 2 shadows moving in rhythm, no longer afraid of the world seeing them side by side. In the quiet hours, when the city slept and the air turned cool, they lay awake in the same bed, hands linked, hearts open. No plans, no vows, just presence. And in that stillness, they knew something sacred had begun. Not out of convenience, not out of loneliness, but out of love that had been forged, not found, built brick by brick, breath by breath, between 2 people who had learned that sometimes the deepest bonds are the ones never spoken until they finally are. The invitation was printed on thick, ivory stock. Gold embossed letters, clean serif font. Elegant, understated. The kind of invitation that once would have sat on James Cole's desk among dozens, quickly forgotten. But this one was different. It bore his name and hers at the top, side by side, honoring Stella Solis and James Cole, founders of Etherbridge. For impact, for innovation, for humanity. Stella read it 3 times before placing it on the table beside a worn notebook she still used to keep her own kind of ledger. Less about numbers, more about people. She hadn't changed much in appearance. Still wore her hair in a no-nonsense braid. Still rolled up her sleeves when things broke. Still carried herself like someone who could vanish into a crowd and not be missed, until she spoke. Then everyone listened. But everything else had changed. The tiny shack she once called home was gone now, replaced by a modest apartment she paid for in full. She had a kitchen that smelled like fresh coffee in the morning, a bed with soft sheets, a closet with clean clothes, a shelf full of second-hand books she'd never had time to read, now dog-eared and loved. And James. James was no longer a man clawing out of ruins. He was steady now, grounded, not because he'd rebuilt his company, but because he'd stopped trying to prove anything. He lived in the present, not in the rearview mirror. And he lived with her. The two of them stood outside a new building that morning, 6 stories tall, white brick and glass, designed with warmth in mind. It wasn't another headquarters. It was the Solis Center, a non-profit and mentorship hub for women in poverty, named not because Stella wanted her name on a wall, but because James insisted that every girl who walked through those doors should know that Solis once meant light and still did. Inside, rooms were already buzzing. A cafe that hired homeless youth, a tech lab with donated laptops, a childcare center, a rooftop garden, a closet with interview clothes, tailored, cleaned, folded with care. Dignity stitched into every inch of the place. Stella and James stood near the entrance, welcoming guests as they arrived for the launch. One woman stepped in slowly, eyes darting, clutching a bag to her chest like it held her entire past. Stella walked over. "First time?" she asked. The woman nodded. "I don't really belong here." Stella smiled gently, that old spark in her eye. "Neither did I," she said. "Until I did." She handed the woman a folder. "There's a resume workshop in room 3. And breakfast downstairs. Take your time. No one rushes you here." The woman's eyes watered. But she nodded. James had watched the exchange from afar. He stepped beside Stella, not speaking, just placing a hand on her lower back. "You still think you don't belong on that stage tonight?" he asked. She smirked. "I still hate speeches." He kissed her temple. "Then don't give one. Just tell them the truth." That night, the gala was held in a converted industrial hall filled with warm lighting and soft music. Journalists mingled with philanthropists. Entrepreneurs raised glasses. Screens around the room showed images of the journey. Photos of Stella sorting through scrap, of James at a makeshift desk, of interns smiling beside rows of laptops. Then came the video. Not slick, not corporate, just stories. A mother who rebuilt her life through Etherbridge. A teen who created her own startup. A woman who said, "For the first time in my life, someone handed me a laptop instead of a broom." When the lights returned, the applause was thunderous. James took the stage. He didn't read from notes. "I was once a man who had everything," he began, voice steady, "but didn't know what it meant to actually build something with love." He paused, then looked down at Stella. "And then I met a woman who picked me out of the trash, not to save me, but to remind me I was human and worth rebuilding." He extended a hand. Stella Solis didn't just help build this company. She built me. She joined him slowly, the room rising in a standing ovation. Her voice, when it came, was soft, firm. "I spent a long time invisible," she said. "But even when I was picking through garbage, I knew one thing. Value doesn't come from where you find something. It comes from how you treat it." She looked around the room, voice rising. "There are thousands of people outside these walls still living in the dark. I was one of them. If this place means anything, let it mean this. No one is too broken to matter. And no one should have to climb alone." The room erupted. Later that night, they stood beneath the city lights, alone at last. James took a small box from his pocket. No velvet, no theatrics, just a ring, crafted from recycled metal. Simple, strong. He didn't kneel. He didn't have to. "Will you keep building with me?" he asked. Stella laughed, eyes shining. "Only if I get to run payroll." He grinned. "Deal." She kissed him before he could ask anything else. And in that moment, 2 souls once discarded stood triumphant. Not because they won, but because they rose together and never once forgot where they came from.